Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Stogie Review video review. And if you're not in the know by now, I am Walt, and I am with Stogie Review, and we do weekly cigar reviews. And following up last week's review, or actually it was 2 weeks ago, I have another cigar, of course, and that is the Panacea Maduro. Now, this cigar is what you would consider a boutique cigar. They're limited production, and they're limited production in the sense that they're a very small company. They're not manufacturing a limited production to increase demand. Panacea cigars are a product of Flatbed Cigar Companies, or Flatbed Cigar Company. Now, the owner of that company's name is Paul Bush, and his office and the entire distribution center of Panacea Cigars is out in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour and a half from Reading, Pennsylvania, where I'm at. Now, cigars themselves are made in the Dominican Republic, and they are made by cigar artisans that have over 60 years combined experience. Now, they don't go into detail saying who makes the cigars, and in my brief research I wasn't able to see who actually manufactures them for Flatbed. But the cigars are available in two models. There's a Brazilian Maduro and a Connecticut Shade, Natural and Maduro. This one is a Robusto. It's a 5x50 Brazilian Maduro wrapper, Dominican binder, and the filler is Dominican and Nicaraguan. As far as the price point goes, I'm not quite sure. The Flatbed Cigars store, where you can actually buy cigars online, seems to be down at the moment, and I'm not seeing a price point on the two other sites that I glanced at. I'll see what I can do about researching that a little bit more on the break, and then I'll get back to you with that information. Now, as I mentioned, there's a Natural and a Maduro, and both the Natural and the Maduro have the same filler, from what it seems. And those are, it's a blend of Cuban seed Seco, Lajero, Olor Dominicano, and Nicaraguan. And the binder in both is Dominican, as I mentioned earlier. Now, with all that information out of the way, we can get to the fun part, which is actually smoking the cigar. Now, first and foremost, the clip was really easy, clean. It's a quality cutter. I would expect no less, actually. Draw is very free. It's got a very defined cedar flavor, and I say very defined because I puffed on it and I immediately thought it reminded me of when you open a humidor. You just get that wave of cedar, that Spanish cedar aroma, and it's very nice. Draw itself is a little free. Maybe a little too free for my personal taste, but not bad. Foot looks good. You know, there's a little bit of space in between the tobaccos. The cigar itself feels very firm, a little on the hard side. There is one tiny little soft spot just below the band, and that is about it. As far as the color goes, it's very consistent. There's a light spot that runs down along beside a vein. Aside from that, it's very consistent head to foot. There is a tiny little water spot on the cigar, or a sunspot, I'm not sure which it is. And there's a couple of medium-sized veins. Overall, you know, when you handle the cigar, it's got a little bit of a rough texture to it, and it's because of those two medium-sized veins that I could feel. But aside from that, cigar feels good. It looks good. By the cold draw, I can tell that I should get lots and lots of smoke. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and get this cigar lit up and move on from there. Now, as you're aware, this is the long, boring part, and I really should do this while I'm talking, but I never think to. On a side note, I'm hoping to get this video up on Friday. I guess you'll tell when it's up when you see the video, but the reason why there may be a delay is because I'm test driving a MacBook, and I'm not quite sure how everything works just yet. So I'm sort of doing this on the fly, and then I'm gonna do the post-production work and just see how it goes. Hopefully I'll have everything edited in time. I'm doing this a day in advance, so we'll see how it goes. Well, the initial draw is kind of lacking in smoke, but I can already feel it coating the walls of the mouth and the tongue. So so far it's got an interesting flavor, a nice mouthfeel. So with that said, that's going to take us into our first production break. I'll be back, and we'll get started on the Panacea Maduro. So sit tight.
Ever since the night we met in December, I remember your charm. You captured me and took me prisoner of you.
Well, hello and welcome back. It's been about 35-40 minutes now, and I'm practically through the first third of my Panacea Maduro. And as you can see, the burn line's nice. The wrapper's nice and oily. That burn line is thin. It's crisp. Ash is light in color for the most part. You look at it up close, it's got these very nice, or very neat looking tiny little white speckles all over it. You can see the oily specks, the tooth from the wrapper are really bright and shining through in the ash, which is something I tend to spend a lot of time looking at for whatever reason, and it's always something I like to mention in the reviews. That is, if the ash looks good or if it looks miserable. But in this case, it's doing very well. It'll take a firm tap in the ashtray to knock that ash off, and it breaks clean. The end of the cigar's got a slight cone to it, which tells me that it's burning properly. The Ligero is burning a little bit slower than the rest of the cigar, so everything it produces that slight conical shape on the foot. I don't have that long spear sticking out of the end of the cigar, nothing inside. As far as the burning characteristics, the construction of the cigar, it is top notch at this point. My only complaint with the construction is the draw. It's just a little bit too loose for my personal taste. It produces lots and lots of smoke on each puff. It's very dense smoke, just fills the mouth, very easy to get through the sinuses, and it's extremely aromatic. And I'm not quite sure how to portray that to you. When I retrohale and blow the smoke through my sinuses, I just get this very rich aroma that just comes through, and it's very enjoyable. And it's really the best way I can put it, is that when you're smoking it, it's very aromatic at your face, not when it's sitting in the ashtray or anything like that. When you're passing the smoke out of your mouth and through the sinuses, it's very rich and aromatic. Body is about medium, and excuse me, the primary flavor at this point is sort of like a dark roasted coffee and nut flavor. Now, that initial blast of Spanish cedar, that aroma on the cold draw that I mentioned, it does come through in the smoke, but it's toned down a little bit more, and it's a nice backdrop to that coffee and roasted nut flavor. And all in all, it just works. The only unpleasant thing about the flavor is it seems a little acidic, and I'm getting a little bit of a tingle on the soft palate, right behind the teeth, and just a little bit on the tip of my tongue. Everything else is fine. It feels creamy, smooth, and whatnot. The smoke is just coming off as just a touch acidic, and I'm not quite sure how to explain that. It's sort of acidic, like I guess like a tomato. It sort of gives you that feel on the soft palate. But aside from that, I'm really enjoying it. It's behaving very well. It's smoking well. The smoke time is about average from what it seems. I may be smoking this one just a little bit faster because I don't have nearly as much going on. Normally I'm importing the video live, and I'm keeping an eye on the feed, and I tend to move just a little bit slower. Now I'm streamlining it, and I tend to be smoking the cigar just a little bit faster than normal. But even keeping that in mind, it seems to be burning right on par with what I would expect. So it doesn't feel like a fast burning cigar, it doesn't feel like a slow burning cigar, it just feels right for this size. So sit tight, I'll be back. We'll do the second third. I've got a couple of pictures of the Panacea Maduros, as well as a little bit of music, courtesy of podsafemusicnetwork.com. So sit tight, and I'll be right back. Well, welcome back, and as you can see, cigar is burning very, very well, and I couldn't be happier with it in terms of burning characteristics and construction. The draw is still a little free. It's not so free that it's bothersome or it heats up the cigar. It's just a little bit much for my taste. The ash, as you saw, is light in color. It's firm, compacted, still has those light little oily speckles all over it. It's a very attractive looking ash. The burn line's thin and even. There's a nice dark crisp ring around the foot of the cigar. Smoke volume is great, lots and lots of smoke. It leaves a very aromatic feel, especially when you get it past through the sinuses. It's just got this overwhelmingly pleasant, just aromatic smell to it. It's I find it very enjoyable. In the flavor department, there's quite a bit going on. It's very interesting. There's a couple of transitions, and then there's a new flavor that pops into view. And the transition, the first one is that Spanish cedar that I noticed early on, and it followed through in the first third. It's still there. It's coming forward a little more to the forefront, but it's developing a sweet characteristic. It's getting sweeter as the cigar burns on. That rich, dark roasted coffee and nut flavor, it's getting darker and richer, and it just seems to be getting I don't know. The only comparison that comes to mind is sort of like mulch. You add a little bit of water to it, it gets that really potent, deep or earthy aroma to it. This is developing the same way. It's getting very rich, earthy, and deep. And there's a little bit of a leathery flavor that's popping in separately. It's quickly moving forward in the cigar. It's not something I noticed earlier on. It just sort of popped up a couple of puffs ago, and I thought it was worth noting. So so far, I'm pleased with the cigar. I still have no idea what this costs. So I'm gonna wait and weigh in on my overall opinion on the cigar, even not knowing what the overall cost is until later on. Body's still medium. It's progressed slightly, but it hasn't transitioned to that mild to medium area, or that mild to medium spectrum that we designate or we break this cigar into. Mild, medium, medium, full, extra full. It's still right middle of the road, just seated there. It's picked up, but not enough to give it a new designation. that little bit of an acidic feel that I was getting on the softer part of my palate, I'm still getting it now. It hasn't changed much. It's still sort of there. It's not really bothersome. It's just very noticeable, and it keeps drawing my attention to it. While it's not necessarily good or bad, I keep noticing it just because it's not something I get with every cigar. And I guess if I was going to call it either nice or pleasant, I think I would err on the side of it being slightly unpleasant. But in either case, I'm enjoying the cigar as a whole. There's just a couple of minor issues I have with it, being that little bit of acidic feel and the draw. So with that said, I'm going to break once again. You can take a look at a few more pictures. I'll be back and we'll do the final third, wrap up the Panacea Maduro, and I'll let you be on your way. So sit tight. Well, welcome back, and as you can see, I've got a little bit more than a nub left of my Panacea Maduro, and that should be an indication that I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Burn line's been great, burn rate is good, volume of smoke is fantastic, smoke density is good, it's easy to get through the sinuses, it leaves this very nice aromatic feel, I don't know, all around my face. I guess that's the best way to put it. The resting smoke is fairly light. It doesn't linger around the room too much. It doesn't seem like it's very offensive, but then again, I'm a cigar smoker sitting in a room of smoke, so it's not necessarily going to be offensive to me. If my wife were to walk in the room, she may have a different opinion, but it really doesn't strike me as a stinky cigar. In terms of flavors, there hasn't been a whole lot of change as far as definitive flavors go. Everything is just, all the defined flavors of the previous third are still there. I'm getting leather, a very earthy, rich, dark roasted coffee and nut flavor, and a more sweet Spanish cedar flavor now. They're very defined, and the difference now is they're becoming richer and more complex. They just pick up this richness as the cigar gets shorter. That's very pleasant. It's interesting enough that the dynamic of the flavor doesn't need to change to keep my interest. The sheer richness of the smoke is more than enough to keep me occupied and keep me focused on the cigar itself. The body is still medium. It hasn't progressed. It's been fairly steady from about halfway through the second third up until now. And the only problem I'm having at this point is the cigar is getting a little warm, and that's obviously to be expected when it begins to get very short. As it begins to warm up, you can definitely feel it in the fingers, and you can feel the heat in your mouth. It produces a harsher flavor, but if you let the cigar rest a minute and cool, that flavor goes away very quickly, and you're back to normal again. You just have to focus on not smoking too fast at this stage in the game. Now that little bit of an acidic flavor that I was getting before is still there, and it's still quite odd. It's not bothering me too much. It's just blatantly obvious, and I guess it's just really drawing my attention to that feel on the soft part of my palate, right behind the teeth, and it's just kind of odd. The draw is still a little loose, but very manageable. It's not heating up overly fast, but it does get warm simply because of the size of the cigar. As far as my my overall impressions of this cigar, I'm very impressed with it, and I'm very happy to have smoked it. Now, I really don't have an idea what the cigar costs, and I kind of think that's a good thing. You know, leaving me to guess at what the cigar's value is, I would say that if this was a $5-6 cigar, I would definitely smoke them quite often if they were available to me. You know, if they had that same price point as the Abe Flores cigars, the Pinar del Rios, you know, I think it's a very good cigar, the top quality, excellent flavor, and I think if it had that affordable price, it'd be a flat-out winner. You know, I just really enjoyed it. I could even see myself paying upwards of about $7 a piece for this cigar, but for whatever reason, I always associate milder cigars with a lower price, and I'm not quite sure why. It's just this kind of strange thing that I do. If I smoke a very mild cigar, I instinctively think, you know, this is a less expensive cigar. I guess I equate fullness or richness of the flavor to a dollar value. So, you know, the very full cigars I tend to think are a little more pricey than the milder cigars. This one falls right in the middle of the road, and I'd be very comfortable spending $5-6 for a Robusto of this cigar. Again, but I have no idea what it costs. Now, maybe for the write-up I'll have that information. I was looking at the Flatbed Cigar website, and one of the retailers listed is a friend of mine, Jim Cronin, down at Top Shelf Cigars, and I'm actually going down there this weekend to do a blind tasting. And I can always stop in and see and actually buy them when I get there, and I have every intention on checking them out. You know, I had very little communication with the brand owner, the owner of Flatbed Cigars, which is Paul. But you know, I'd be very interested in heading down to the office. I'm not quite sure if there's anything to see at the office in Bucks County, but if it were all possible, I'd love to go down there and see what's going on. Maybe talk to Paul and get a little more information out about his cigars. Maybe have him talk about his cigars or whatnot. That is, if he sees the video and he's interested in doing it. But you know, I'm very happy with it. You know, as I was finishing up the cigar, I was just kind of hopping around on the web, and there's some interesting stuff going on. There's some interesting discussion. I wasn't able to listen to the Porchcast, which is Nathan's podcast. Nathan and Cam do, I think it's a weekly show on cigars and football. And they did a segment on Panacea cigars, and I'm kind of interested to check that out when I have a little bit of time. I want to listen to the interview or listen to all the discussion that they talked about. Another good source of information I found was Lisa over at Her Humidor has a review of both the natural and the Maduro, and it was kind of interesting to see what she thought as compared to what I had in my review, or what I had in my notes and whatnot. So the word is spreading. It seems like Paul may have contacted some of the bloggers, and he's I think that's a great approach also. You know, you have a new cigar on the market, or even a cigar that you want to promote a little bit, you sort of start this grassroots movement and sort of work your way up the chain and spread them out along the bloggers, and then obviously you'll move up along into the magazines and whatnot. But you know, it was very interesting to see. I remember Bob and Dale mentioned having this cigar and thinking it was good as well. So, you know, the cigar seems to be making its rounds, and you know, I'm very interested in getting other people's input on the cigar. If you've had it before, I'd love to get your impression or find out what you thought about it, because I did enjoy it. I'm not sure what it costs, but even not knowing what it costs, I definitely recommend it to anyone that's looking for a medium-bodied cigar that's got this very rich aromatic quality to it. And so anyway, that's all I've got to say about it. As far as next week's review goes, I've got to get back into I got to finish up the Los Blancos stuff that I'm doing. I'm going to do the Los Blancos Connecticut, and after that, I really need to get finished up on the La Aroma de Cuba, I think. No, the Isle de Cuba stuff. I've got to finish that up. I've got 2 more cigars I need to do, and one is the natural, and the other is the Wango Tango. Probably going to do the natural first, and then I'm really not sure where we're going to go from there. But that, you know, that at least gives you 2 weeks of cigars to look for if you want to smoke along with me. So anyway, hopefully all this goes well on my crash course on iMovie, everything works out as well as I can hope. So until next week, happy smoking.